Hey, it's Nate again, and today we're going to talk about why I joined the military, specifically the Army, and what I learned. Now, people ask me all the time, especially out here in La La Land, why I went from the Army to being a filmmaker. Well, the truth is that it's the other way around. I actually was always a filmmaker. Now, I say filmmaker because my creative interests and the things I was doing since I was a kid lent naturally to the medium of filmmaking. So I knew that that's really where I needed to best express myself in life, and that's what I needed to do. But I didn't want to just jump into it. I think it's important as an artist that you try to live life as much as possible and then find the things that resonate with you and then express them through your talents or abilities. And the military became something that I, as a young man, determined would be a great way to challenge myself and to really experience life in the fast lane, so to speak, to really reap the fruit of human experience. And this was like in sixth grade when I made this decision, and I had a specific interest in aviation. I loved aviation. I just love the idea of being a pilot. The complexity of that job. The fact that the aircraft doesn't lie. That you get in an aircraft and you either do it or you don't, and there's really no excuse. That appealed to me very much. I did have some perspective of the military from my dad and my oldest brother. My dad was finishing college during the Vietnam War, and instead of being drafted, he decided I'm gonna actively join to avoid being drafted in something like the Marines where he didn't want to go. My dad didn't agree with the Vietnam War or anything like that, but he knew that he was an able-bodied male that could serve. So he ended up joining the Coast Guard he became a Coast Guard officer. And the Coast Guard, people don't know this, actually deployed. So the Coast Guard went to Vietnam, and my dad was an officer on a ship supporting operations in Vietnam. And wrote a paper about it in high school, and he did have an emotional response to. I remember he talked about they had to do fire missions on shore. They'd fire on these grid squares, and they would get kill counts back, which would be a mix of, you know, military and civilian. And obviously that deeply affected him. He was very bothered by that and still is. Um, so I knew about that. He also encouraged me to read a book called Chicken Hawk, which was written by a Vietnam helicopter pilot. Very, very good book. It was a national bestseller back in 1983, which is when I was born. And I actually know the author. Very, very, I would highly recommend that book if you want to take an intimate look at the Vietnam War through a helicopter pilot's perspective. Bob is a true artist. That's the author of the book. Anyway, my oldest brother was in the Air Force. And he joined because my parents needed help paying for college. So my brother got an ROTC scholarship for the Air Force. And he served 4 years. He didn't deploy or anything like that. He wasn't in a combat role or anything like that. He did not like his experience particularly. He thought the Air Force was okay, but ROTC he was not a fan of. But I had perspective there. And I'm the only person in my family that willingly said that without any prodding. I was like, I actually want to do this. I want to go into the Army, and I want to fly helicopters. The way I saw it, this evolved. I initially wanted F-18s in the Navy, but as I got a little bit older, the Army became very appealing to me because the Army is where the bulk of the helicopters are. It's where the helicopters do the most in the military, and I thought that it would be a more unique experience for me to be flying helicopters with soldiers on board and being close with like that relationship of the pilot and the air crew and the ground soldiers was seemed very inspiring to me. Also, in the Army, you're a soldier first, so no matter what you do, you're a soldier first. And there was something sort of humbling about that for me. It's like, yeah, I'm going to be a pilot and things like this, but I'm a soldier first, and therefore it's always about the guy on the ground. At the end of the day, it's always about those people on the ground and how we can help them. So anyway, there was no guarantee that I would get aviation. Aviation is a very sought after branch. Pilots are a very sought after role in the military. Um, you meet people. Everyone wants to be a pilot, but very few people get to do it. And so I knew that I had to work really hard in school. I had to do the best I could, and make sure that I was physically and mentally sound. So in a way, it gave me these goals that kept me really focused in school. And then I ended up getting a full ride scholarship, ROTC scholarship, to college. ROTC is very different than JROTC. JROTC is a high school program, sort of like a club. ROTC is in college, and it's really where people are getting serious about training to be officers. In the military, there are officers and enlisted. Officers make up about 10% of the military, and they are known primarily as the leaders and sort of the planners. Although enlisted, you do get senior enlisted and mid-grade enlisted that become leaders of their own right, and they sort of work together. But I was going to be an officer. I had a full scholarship. I excelled in school. I excelled in ROTC. I got a lot of great leadership training while in ROTC. I also did summer training. I was doing Army training schools. I was doing airborne school, air assault school. These are specialized schools in the military. And I just thought the overall experience was, it was really good for me as a young person, because I was in a program with a lot of prior enlisted soldiers from Fort Campbell, Kentucky. These were people who had already been in the Army as enlisted soldiers. Some of them were senior enlisted soldiers, so they had a lot of experience, and now they were they had made the cut and were transitioning to become officers. So I was learning from people who had been there and done that, and I was also working with people from all different backgrounds, men and women from all over the United States and even the world. And just we were all learning how to work together and communicate effectively. One thing I learned right away about the military is the military forces you to answer up to yourself first and foremost. People think that you wear these uniforms and it makes you all the same, and nobody has a voice, and you sort of become robots. That couldn't be further from the truth. What I realized is putting on uniforms takes away any sort of bias that you might present with civilian clothing or other things. What the uniform does is it levels the playing field, and suddenly you're looking at people and you're sort of figuring them out based on their character and the quality of their character. I remember when I was a platoon leader, I had a soldier who he was a young enlisted soldier, and he was so just really good. He's smart, very driven. He was a team player, just a really great soldier. And we did a family sort of gathering in civilian clothes, and he showed up, and he was dressed, at that time, he was dressed what people would say he looked like a school shooter. That was the phrase people used. And so civilians, on the civilian side, people would judge him hard and have a certain idea about this kid, not knowing that he was actually a very smart, a very focused, a very driven young guy, and he was one of the most promising young people I've ever met. So that was something I learned right away. It didn't matter what color your skin was, whether you were a man or a woman. It really all boiled down to what kind of person you are, and how you can work well with others, and how you choose to lead under stress. One of the best things the military is very good at training and very good at, and what I experienced, teaching leadership. You really learn about how to get the best out of people, and how to play to their strengths and help them through their weaknesses. and vice versa. You also learn to hold a mirror up to yourself and say, what am I good at and what am I not good at? I need to recognize those things about myself. I need to be clear about communicating those things to others. And I need to rely on my team to help me make up for those weaknesses and empower those strengths. So it's a very special thing that I have not really seen in the civilian world. In fact, I will say the military is not perfect by any means. It certainly has a lot of problems, and it's got a long way to go in certain areas. But I have, being in the civilian world now for a decade. The civilian world is far worse. I mean, the leadership is almost non-existent, and there's a lot more problems in the civilian world than there are in the military. I can tell you that. Anyway, I was in ROTC. I worked really hard. I ended up getting the branch that I wanted. I ended up getting aviation. In fact, I was actually the #1 cadet in the whole country that was picked for aviation that year when I graduated. And I was also like number 23 or 4 out of all the cadets in the nation that year. So it was a good thing because my hard work and dedication paid off. And then I got to go to flight training right away. So sometimes young officers have to wait like a year to start their training. Well, because I had ranked so well, they sent me off like right away. And while I was in flight training, which was about a year and a half, which was intense, it's a lot. It's the best training in the world for helicopters. You do everything from the basics all the way through combat skills, through night vision goggles. You also do survival school, which is a very humbling experience, and then different officer training courses. And you end up coming out the end of that with, you can get the civilian equivalent of a commercial rotary and instrument pilot rating. And also, you're at that point, I was a second lieutenant still, and I went off to my first unit. So I had achieved one of my major life goals. And then once that training was over, the training continues, because all the military does when we're not in a conflict is we're training for conflict. We're training for the worst case scenario. There's something about when I was in, you have an idea about what it's going to be like, but then when you're in, it becomes something totally different. Most of my time as a young officer was spent taking care of my soldiers. The Army is not a job. It's not a 9 to 5. It's not something you leave behind when you go home. It's a service. It truly is a sacrifice, because you're giving yourself in a very selfless way to the needs of the country, is essentially what it is. And your soldiers are your family. They're your responsibility. So, if you get a call in the middle of the night that Private John Doe was arrested for getting into a bar fight, that's your problem. You have to then go figure out how to help that soldier and how to help them work through their issues. And these were things as a young, I was 24 when I entered into the ranks there. These are big things that you take on at a young age. I helped people. I took the stand in court for one of my soldiers in a child custody battle. My first day as a platoon leader, I had one of my soldiers come to me almost in tears, a warrant officer come to me almost in tears because he had just gotten back from Iraq and he was fighting a custody battle against for his 3 kids, and it was destroying him. And he needed time, but we had to get ready to go to Afghanistan, so we had all these things to do. But I realized I have to take care of these people first, and I have to help them figure out their life issues first so that they can be present when we need them to be. And these were decisions that are just thrown at you from day one. And as a young officer, their livelihood is essentially in your hands. So I learned very quickly that it's people first, mission always, but people first. And I feel like I tried to always do that, and I put people first, and it paid off because I've seen that gentleman went on to have he's like the model father. His kids are doing very well, and he's just always there for them. There's so many stories I can share about the soldiers that I've worked with, that I've had under my command, and that I've been under, who have just made really good decisions to take care of each other. And that's a very special thing that I honestly haven't seen so much of in the civilian world. Another thing I spoke a little bit about earlier is in the military, you learn very quickly that you are your own greatest enemy and that there are no excuses. So, for example, when you're flying a helicopter, you're learning to fly a helicopter. It's very hard. The people that I was in flight training with were the cream of the crop. These people were the best of the best, and they'd been used to being good at everything. And then they get into the helicopter, and it's so hard to fly and to do the radio and to figure that out and to do it and get ready for like how to do it at an extreme level with advanced aircraft. And it's very humbling. And you learn very quickly that you either do it or you don't. And if you can't do it, you need to stop blaming the helicopter and figure out why you are not doing it and why you're unable to uh, complete certain tasks the way you're supposed to. And this is sort of throughout the military. In training, you see the cliche videos of the drill sergeant yelling at the young soldiers. That's like basic training stuff. Most of the military is not yelling and screaming. It's very professional. People are very, for the most part, very reasonable, and it's a safety first kind of thing. And at the end of the day, the training, which is what the military does best, is very much a mirror up to yourself, saying, "Where am I mentally and emotionally? What excuses am I making to not do the thing I'm supposed to do or not get past this part of the phase that I'm supposed to get past to get this qualification or to prepare for this next step?" And it's very, as much as it's a team focused, selfless environment, it's also very individual, because it forces you to really own up to yourself. And that was probably one of the most valuable takeaways I got as a young guy, is because I learned very quickly to to be wary of making excuses for myself and the things that maybe certain behaviors or things I couldn't do. I learned very quickly how to fix those things and and essentially make myself a more complete, well-rounded person. Um, Also, people ask me all the time about, oh, it sounds how I couldn't do that. I couldn't do that. You would be surprised what you can do. Um, if you put yourself in a well-run environment with professionals who know what they're doing, and they put you to the test, or they put you through something with proper training and prepare you and sort of teach you through it, I guarantee you, you would be blown away with what you could accomplish. And that is another great thing that I learned taking away from my military service, is I have done so much more than I probably would have if I just went into film or into the civilian world, because everything happens so much faster, and it is very well run, especially on the training side. Um, with that said, my perspectives are a very small window. I was an officer, I was an aviator in the Army. I was in for 7 years. My commitment for a pilot was 6. It ended up being about 7 years. Um, there are many different experiences. Most of the military are enlisted personnel, and a lot of the voices that I'm seeing online are usually junior enlisted, people that were in for a couple years and got out. There's very different perspectives from that side to, say, my side, or for someone who's been in for 20 years. But it's very different for everybody. I've heard some pretty sad experiences and pretty terrible experiences. I personally wouldn't want to go back and do it again, because it is hard and the military is not perfect, and living that lifestyle is very much a sacrifice. It's not conducive for families. It's especially when you're going at a time of war. It's very stressful. There's a lot on the line, and it is very much a service, very much a selfless sacrifice, especially if you're in a combat arms branch where you're actually on the fighting the wars. Most of the military does not do the fighting. Most of the military supports the fight. So, but it's all very stressful. But with that said, I have no regrets. I've grown exponentially during my 20s with those experiences. I've learned a lot about myself. I am proud of my service. Um, I didn't join because of 9/11. I actually had my contract signed right before 9/11. But I realized what I was getting into, and then I grew and learned a lot from going through it myself. So if you do have questions about the military, if you had different experiences, I would love to hear about it. I know there's all kinds of different perspectives. This is just my one very narrow perspective. But overall, that's why I joined, and it has since led to me having, I think, greater perspective and more meaningful experiences in life and as an artist now writing and directing films. So thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more. Okay.